Hello and welcome to Hanratty on Karate. Finally got my history recordings all done and I hope they were helpful to people. It was kind of sketchy. I couldn't talk about everything, obviously. I mean, a nation's history is kind of vast and really comprehensible. I just picked out some points for some people on the different eras. You know, the relationship of the emperor to the common people, if you like, and the position of the samurai, you know, as a martial class, and their disappearance and why they disappeared, and then Japan's entrance into the international theatre as a sovereign nation in its own right. Hope you enjoyed that. As I say, there's lots more material there, and you should really do your own research if you're interested enough to do it. There's some great books, mostly by the Tuttle Publishing Company, which publishes a lot of Japanese books, and I've quite a few karate books here that are published by Tuttle. They're a good resource if you're interested in them. Anyway, so this weekend I have a Kata course coming up for my students and, you know, from my clubs around in Alberta. And I was at a competition a few weeks ago now. If you know me, I don't have much time for WKF competitions, sports karate as such, pretty much of a traditionalist. Sometimes it just gets up your nose. What gets up my nose particularly is the kata competitors. I mean, these are people who just do kata. They don't train for anything else. They don't train for kumite, don't train in sparring. They come in with the gis straight from the dry cleaners in the bags, put them on, make sure the back bit's starched so it sticks out a bit. The belts are cut to perfect length. They got all sorts of labels on the gis just so that you know they're supposed to be a competition winner or whatever. And then the way that they march on is just over-exaggerated, and it just made me think. I have a motto written in kanji above the dojo as you walk into the dojo in my club. It says in Japanese, "Kata without ego and form follows function." And I have a little brass plate alongside it that gives you the translation. If you're a serious karateka and you're training in all of the disciplines, but basically you can distill them down to Kion, Kata, and Kumite, which is basics, form, and fighting, all right? You can't do one without the other, so to call it karate is a little bit more than a misnomer. It's an outright lie. And if that's all that you're doing, and it's just for sport, then you're pretty narrow in your outlook. I mean, most of them only have about 3 katas. They probably don't know any of the basic ones. Maybe they do, but it didn't look like it to me, because if you practice basic kata, you get your basic movements and your body mechanics. The whole physiology is different and how you put the techniques together. But basically this competition, particularly in the higher grade stages, turned into an Unsu competition. Now, Unsu is a popular kata, especially with the show-offs. None of them had any idea what they were doing. They just, like, monkey see, monkey do, to be honest with you. And some monkeys do it better than others, but none of them know why. So if you really want to have a look at Unsu, then you have to go to somebody like Yahara Sensei, who did a brilliant Unsu, and he's the one who demonstrates Unsu in Nakayama's books, Best Karate. And I think it's number 10, I'm not sure. I'll have to have a look in my library here, but I think it's number 10, where they do Unsu and Niju Shiho, I think. Anyway, have a look. The only other person I've ever seen do a really good Unsu, well, actually I've seen a couple, I'll tell a lie, but Michel Filon, fortunately passed away now, did an absolutely brilliant Unsu quite a few years ago, French karateka, and Sean Roberts, British karateka, did an amazing Unsu in competition. Now there's a few others. Paul Key comes to mind, Kevin Warner down in the States comes to mind. Really fantastic Unsu. Anyway, I wanted to have a quick look, got into this history mode, and I wanted to do a little bit of research on Unsu, where it comes from, and when it comes into the Shotokan system, and just basically what it means. I always look at katas, then I look at the old name of the kata, or the Okinawan name of the kata, and this is one of the katas. I have a list of katas with the original Okinawan names, and then usually a little bit of history behind them, where they came from, what Chinese style and all stuff like that. Unsu, it's pretty much the same name that has come through from Aragaki Seisan. Aragaki Seisan was the first person to put Unsu together, and it's kind of an unusual. Now, if you go into the Japanese, they look more for the symbolism behind the kata than what the techniques are for. The symbolism behind this kata is called cloud hands, or pushing the clouds apart. And if you read Nakayama's book, he talks about how clouds are transformational and they can change in nature from 1 minute to the next, wispy and then solid and then lightning and things like that. But this comes from the opening move, where you kind of push your hands apart, parting the clouds and seeking the way. It's a relatively modern kata, comes from Shorin-ryu, and I say Aragaki Seisho, mid-19th century. Basically now there's a whole list of roots for the kata: white crane, monk fist, dragon form, and it's probably a mix of all of them. And when the JKA, just after the war, wanted to bring in more katas, they held a meeting and decided that they were going to have a look at the different katas. And this was about 1948. They really wanted to standardize the katas that they have and put down a standard list of katas that were acceptable in the Shotokan system. And Unsu was one of them. Original name Unsu, or Aragaki Unsu, and different ways, different names, but it came through to us as Unsu. So it was Aragaki who developed it. He also developed Niju Shiho, Sochin, and Seisan, which is a different version of Hangetsu. It's not much different, actually. When I've been taught it by Shorin-ryu guy when I was in Hokkaido many, many years ago, it was almost exactly the same as the Shotokan version that we did. Now, when you look at Unsu, it's got lots of different styles and stances in it, and lots of different unique weapons and hand techniques. None of them are like dead straight techniques. So we have Kata Uki, which is a one-figure hooking block. We have Haito in it, Taisho. We have all sorts. We even have a feint in there. And we have a couple of inside tension stances, Nekoashidachi, Sanshindachi. And we also have outside tension stances. But there's not supposed to be any Kokutsudachi in it. Now, when I first saw this kata, it was, I believe, Kanazawa that was teaching us it. And a fantastic teacher, fantastic karate man. And he did the takeoff for the jump in Kokuts. So I just followed that and did it. And then I got corrected a little later on, and it was supposed to be from Furudachi. Now, this is a great departure from what I saw at this sport karate competition. There was people pulling the leg back, going from Nekoash, and then other people taking a giant leap, almost like a Pilates type of springboard to get the height on the jump. But the jump didn't mean anything. It's supposed to be like a blocking kick, Mikazuki, and then a Shirogeri. Your Shirogeri you very rarely see formed. It's more, you see a Shirogeri a lot more if you look at Kankusho, almost the same jump, and we have another 90 degrees on that jump in Unsu. So it's a full 360 turn in the air and drop down, looking ahead. It's the only Shotokan kata that has a Mawashigeri in it, but the Mawashigeri is delivered from the floor, from quite a unique position, dropping onto the floor and then kicking Mawashi on both sides. And then again, you repeat the cloud hands position. So if we go on to it and have a real good look at Unsu, it's got some really good techniques in there and some unusual techniques in there. Now, when I'm teaching it, I always tell my students, this kata is front and rear, or fore and aft, as I like to say, being an old sailor. So a lot of your techniques are forward, and then they're immediately behind you. And even when you're on a diagonal, when you're coming in from the feint and you do the Jodan and Gedan punch, you feint with your left hand. When you come from the Heisogadachi position, it's almost like the start position of the kata. Then you step forward with your left leg. If you know the kata, you know which part I mean. Then you kind of feint to the face, punch up, and then punch down to the groin. and then immediately you punch behind and back again, really fast. And you're supposed to have a full twist of the hip and a full shift of weight to the back leg and then back again. You don't see this with the sport karate crowd. Then you come into Furudachi for the Taisho, and then lock it into Zenkuts when you make the Hasamiyuki, and then a Kakomi. And this is the only kata I know you have a Maigeri Kakomi in it as well. And it's a really interesting kata when you follow the form. It's got amazing rhythm in the kata. It almost pulls you along. And some people say that was probably because it was from one of the Okinawan folk dancers that influenced the kata. Now, I don't know if that's true, but it could well be. But it was developed through Tamari. Now, when Funakoshi sent Nakayama to learn, and a few other students to learn these katas, they focused solely on the Tamari katas. We don't get any of the Nahate katas like the Goju katas. They never bothered with them. They basically took all from Shorin and Ishinryu. And over the years, all of the katas have gone through some kind of revisions. People have changed them here, there, and everywhere. But when you look at Unsu, the different versions of it, particularly if you look at the, I think it's a Shorin-ryu version, a Shita-ryu version rather, this is a little bit different. They don't do the drop down. They do the drop down, but where we do a Mawashigiri, they do a back kick. And then on the jump, they don't jump. They just kind of drop to the floor, look both ways. It always reminds me of somebody dropping down and then looking for their keys underneath the car. But obviously they've got an application for it, and I wouldn't disrespect anything, with the Shita-ryu or any of those, because they are very good karate for the majority of them. I'm sure that they get just as cheesed off with other people as well. The other Unsu that I found was on Richard Kim's group. And this is almost entirely different. It's basically a punching and kicking kata, and it has a kind of a Chinese thing, cross-leg stance, which is kind of hard to perform. But this also occurs in Aragaki Niseishi, which is from the same source. And Niseishi is just the old word for Niju Shiho. So 3 sources there if you're looking at it. But the point I was making really is it's just been so polluted and taken apart by the sport karate people. And I can see why, because it's got this big fancy jump in it. I mean, if you haven't got the balance to do Gankaku with that nice jump in it, and even then, they take off way too high for the double kick. It's got to be practical. And unfortunately, a lot of sport karate is not practical. So anyway, a little bit about Unsu, a little bit of background on it. There's some good articles on it if you want to dig deep. There's lots of applications, but please don't look at the team applications that you see in the sport karate, where the team all do the kata at the same, it's supposed to be synchronized kata, and then they do a demo to show you their idea of what it's for. It's just a demonstration. It's very acrobatic. It's probably quite entertaining, but it's not really karate, all right? So if you're going to do a kata, any kind of kata, you need to have a really good knowledge of basics, how to perform the basic technique, not just follow the form that you see and go, oh, that looks good, I'm going to do that, I'll get big marks. And what I particularly hate was when people do this jump and they manage to achieve a fair height and they land without falling flat on their faces, and the audience gives them applause. Come on. You don't applaud every kick at a football at a football match. Why would you do that? It's just part of the kata. Maybe at the end of the kata, if it was a decent performance, and I never saw one, to be honest with you, then you might give a nod of acknowledgement. But to applaud somebody just because they've done something that they've practiced 500 times and that's all they've practiced, I don't think so. Not my cup of tea anyway. Anyway, I'm going to keep it short this week and see what happens. Golfing season's coming up, so I may miss a week or two with these podcasts. As always, throw your 10 cents worth in if you feel like it and let me know what you think. Maybe I'll get back to you next week after I've done my weekend seminar on our katas and trying to keep the standards the way that I was taught, which is probably different than the way JKA are doing them now, but that's okay. I use Best Karate as my criteria for teaching kata and for performing kata. That's what Best Karate Series was put out for. Nakayama and the people from Waseda Takashoko and other universities got together to standardize the katas. The standardized katas were put into the Best Karate Series, and there's old 60s video on them if you care to look even deeper. I know I've got the full set somewhere, but they're all done by first generation JKA instructors, and they're absolutely brilliant. And if you do them the same way as they're done in the book, you don't need all this fancy stuff because it's applicable, if you know what I mean. You can look at it and you can use it. Maybe not all of it. You don't use all of the kata, but you can use certain points in the kata, certain techniques in the kata to complete your arsenal for your self-defense when you come to use it. Anyway, I'll talk to you all again. Take care.